All right, hey, I'm going to go ahead and get started because of time. And I want to make sure that you guys get to lunch. So if they come in, they just get in. They'll catch up where we left off. So, well, my name is Abraham Xiong. I am originally from a small little country called Laos. Anybody heard of Laos? Oh, all of you. Wow, that's usually unknown most of the time. But I immigrated here as a young child. We were indigenous people of the country of Laos, and we live up in the mountains. Some people call us the rednecks of Laos. And so, I feel right home here in Georgia. And so, among some of my family members. But, my parents were the first generation to make contact with the world. So think of a Amazonian tribe in Brazil where they made contact. Some of them have never made contact with the world, or some of them have very limited contact with the world. Well, my parents were the first generation to make contact with the world. We don't have a writing system until some French Catholic priests came up to the mountains, lived with our people, and then in their generation, my parents' generation, gave us a writing system. So during the Vietnam War, we were allies with the U.S., and so when the GIs came to Vietnam, came to Cambodia, to Laos, to Burma, we were allies with the U.S., and when we took care of the GIs and we fought along the GIs, protecting the country from the communist regime. And so when the U.S. pulled out, we decided that we're going to flee the country because we didn't know what was going to happen to us. I remember as a young child, I was about 6 years old trying to escape Laos, and we hid in the jungle. We ate whatever we can. We ate from the land. I remember eating all kinds of exotic bugs, caterpillars that's about that long, about that round. You grill it, kind of like marshmallow. So it tastes, it's got a crusty front, but it's soft and juicy inside, just like marshmallow. But that was my childhood. And I remember we got to the borders of Laos and Thailand, and we had to cross over to the other side. And on the other side was safety. If we get to the other side, we were going to be safe. But we didn't know who was going to help us because we can't swim across the river. It's like the Mississippi River. You can't just swim across. So we thought, how do we get to the other side? And we decided that we're going to take some risk, and we looked for a family along the river that had a boat, and they said, we'll help you to get to the other side. And so we got to the other side, stayed in the refugee camp for about a year, and then finally there was a Lutheran church in Ohio that sponsored us to come to the United States. So that's kind of how we got to the U.S. And I share that story a little bit because of this here. Government contracting is very similar to that there. It is a whole new world. And when we came to the U.S., we didn't speak a single word of English. We had to learn everything from the very basics of ABCs. So going to the government market is the same thing. And so in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little about the government market, but how your business, how important it is to government agencies, because they need you, because we have critical infrastructure that exists, and some of them are very vulnerable. We've experienced a lot of that more recently. Every single time there's a hurricane that comes through, we experience how weak our infrastructures are. So I'm going to share some of these things here with us. Because of time, I'm limited on time, so.
I got that correct. They take all the time you need.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so because of that, I'll still go as fast as I can so I can get you guys out to lunch. But we're going to be learning a lot of the things, why the government needs your services. We're going to learn what type of product or services are they looking for. And we're going to talk about agency opportunities that's available for you as a business owner right now. And then how do you get started, or how do you go from where you're at in the government market? And also, I'm going to share with you some secrets, some secret techniques in terms of how to use no competition to get a direct award. We're going to talk about secret number 2, how to use co-opetition or teaming to get contracting faster. And then number 3 is how to use an eBay-like website to help you to get contracting opportunities. In addition, secret number 4, how to use unsolicited proposals. Anybody use unsolicited proposals before? Okay, one person. All right, we're going to talk about unsolicited proposals. And then number 5 is how to take advantage of broad agency announcements to help you get sole source contracts. Number 6, how to use grants for your for-profit corporations, because sometimes we think grants is only for nonprofit. There's grant opportunities for for-profit businesses. And number 7 is OTAs. Anybody use OTAs before? Oh, okay, a few. Awesome. So OTA is a method that's going to allow you to win sole source contract, $50 million, no competition. So we're going to talk about these things here. I share about myself. I'm not going to talk a lot about myself because of time. We've trained over 10,000 companies with the Government Contract Association. We do this here because we saw that the small business community are extremely underrepresented in the government space. Large companies wins about 80% of all the contracts out there. So GCA was formed with that mission to change the landscape of this contracting world, create the disparity that exists between small businesses and government agencies. So that's really why we exist. We're founded right here in Atlanta, Georgia. We have a second chapter in Washington State. And so we're looking to expand to different chapters. Really, the core why we exist is to support the small business community. I'm going to share a lot of different things. This is for educational purposes. I'm going to share examples of companies that we work with. Your results are your own based upon the work that you put into. Just kind of share that a little bit. But for most of us, this is government contracting. It is, see if you find the 2 red balls in there. Yep. All right, you found 1, 2. So this is government contracting. It is organized chaos. That's what it is. And so if you look at it, to the untrained eyes, it doesn't make any sense. But if you understand the government process, the FAR, the regulations, it makes total sense. And so until it makes sense to you, it's just chaos. So hopefully at the end of today, this short presentation, I'm going to help you to understand a few components of this crazy process here.
Thank you.
All right. So common mistakes. I'm going to start with talking about a few common mistakes that businesses make. Sometimes we think that contracts will come to us, and the agency is going to say, oh, you're a small business. Here are some contracts for you. Or if you think that if I get women-owned certification, or if I get a service disabled veteran certification, or if I get a 8A certification, contract's going to fall from the sky. That does not happen. It's very rare. I work with thousands of businesses. It's very rare that a contracting officer will call you and say, hey, I've got something that might be up your alley. It's extremely rare. But it does happen once in a blue moon if you are in a niche market and you have a specific service. Another mistake, you don't invest in yourself to learn how to speak Governese. Right?
Oh.
It's a different culture.
We were like, what's happening?
Wrong class. No, I shouldn't be right class. So you got to invest in yourself to learn how to speak Governese, the language of contracting. It's as if when we first came to the United States, we had to cross the river, and if you're trying to go somewhere and you don't speak the language, you have to look for interpreters and translators to kind of help you navigate the first few years until you get comfortable. So that's another mistake that businesses make. Often, businesses fail to understand how different the government world is compared to the commercial sector. For example, I'm from Laos, most Asian culture. If I invited you to come over to my house for dinner, my wife's going to cook dinner for you. And in the South, right, when you have dinner with friends, you clean the plate. Because in the South, that means that the food was awesome, that the host was great. But if you were cleaning your plate, because I'm very Americanized, but if we were eating at my mom's house and you were trying to communicate to my mom that the food was awesome, she's very Asian. And so you try to tell her that the food was awesome by cleaning your plate, she would still think that you need more food. And she thinks that, oh man, my guest is still hungry. She's going to go get more food out and serve it to you on your plate because she wants to be a great host, which is the opposite. The culture in the government world is different. So that's another mistake that businesses make. Businesses don't always commit and create a dedicated team. That's another mistake that businesses make. You need a team of many, many different skill sets. And if you're anybody who's a solopreneur, any solopreneurs in here? Okay, a few of you. So you have to wear many, many different hats. For example, you have to be a capture manager, which is a business development person. You have to be a proposal writer. You have to be a compliance officer. We just heard about DCA compliance earlier. So you have to be your own legal team. We call it government contracting because it's all about contracts. There is the RFP, or the solicitation, which is half of the contract, and your proposal is the other half. And when they come together, they form a binding agreement between you and the government. And so you have to act as your own legal, or else you need outsourced support. And so you got to build a team around you, and that's just a few of the components. There's a lot more to your team than that there. Another mistake is that businesses don't put in the right marketing strategy or the right marketing infrastructure or the right marketing collateral. And you're sending a contracting officer your brochure. Well, they don't use brochures in the government market. You're sending to them your infomercial, your video infomercial. Well, that's okay, but they prefer a capability video. So how do you create these marketing collateral? And so you have to learn how to do that there. Another mistake is you fail to have a financial plan. I remember helping a small business. He won a $1.2 million contract. But at that time, I was newer in the government space, trying to help small businesses, and I didn't ask a very important question. Do you have $200,000 when you win this $1 million project? And he won. So he didn't have his mobilization capital. He didn't have a reserve. He's just a small business like many other small businesses, didn't know how to get started. He almost lost the contract. Fortunately, we took the FAR, and we went to the contractor. We said, hey, the FAR says that there's some construction here, and can you advance some money? So we used the FAR to advance him some money. And so it just depends, right? So understanding that you got to have a financial plan. And then don't wing the proposal process. Right? You're just like, hey, you know what? I've never written a proposal, but I'm just going to go wing it. Get some help, get some classes. Maybe hire a proposal writer the first 2 or 3 projects so that you can build a template. So there's an investment that you have to make. So maybe that may be a good way to start. Or you lack compliance, which we just talked about. Some other common mistakes is that you don't understand how teaming works. 70% of projects in the government market requires 2 or more companies to work together. So if you're thinking that you're going to just go out there and do it by yourself, you're going to see that there's a lot of holes that you're missing. Another mistake, you don't have a mentor. Everybody needs a mentor, whether it's a larger company mentoring your small business or someone who's seasoned in the industry as an individual, adding them to your board of advisors, bringing them on as a part of your board of directors. You need guidance. You need mentorship in this program. And then you don't bid on projects. You're still like, I'm going to keep on learning. 5 years later, you're still learning. Some of you are still learning. But if you don't submit a bid, you don't win. And so I remember a young lady, I said, hey, you know what, let's practice. You know, I know you're not ready, but let's practice. And we submitted a proposal up in Kalamazoo, North Carolina, and she won on her first bid. And so we celebrated. It was a $230,000 project, doing some flooring on the facilities there. But you practice, and you don't win, but you keep practicing until you win. And then you fail to implement key certain strategies. For example, one of the best strategies is to start out as a subcontractor. You don't need to be a prime. And I remember working with a company, and he said, Abe, I want to eat at the table with the big boys. And I said, that's awesome. I'm going to help you and teach you how to eat at the table with the big boys. But the first strategy I'm going to teach you is how to be a subcontractor that eats off the plate from the big boys. And he said, no, I don't want to be a subcontractor. So 6 months into his contracting endeavor, he finally said, oh, you know what? I think you're right. Let me focus on being a subcontractor as well as trying to be a prime at the same time. And we started working with CH2M Hill, engaging them. He does environmental remediation, so he started engaging them, and they awarded him a $1.3, $1.4 million subcontracting projects. And so you gotta have multiple strategies instead of just being a prime. But one of the biggest mistakes is businesses fail to make the right relationships. And this PowerPoint is available to AFCEA, or I'm going to leave my business cards up here. So if you want access to the PowerPoint, feel free to email me or reach out to Missy and Paul and get a copy of it. There's 6 types of relationships you must have in the government market to be successful. The biggest mistake businesses make, let me see if I can get my pointer, not working. But in the center, the green, the yellow that's you. You're the contractor. But there's 6 relationships that you have to build. The very top is the agency itself. They're the ones that have the problem. They have the pain point. So you got to have a relationship with the program manager, the program director. You got to have a relationship with the end user, or sometimes we call them the customer. But the customer does not have contracting authority. So you need to work with somebody who can award a contract to you. They have the problem. The contracting authority comes from the contracting officer, the bottom green circle there. And then the contracting officer, they have authority, but they don't have influence. So you got to have a relationship with the small business advocates, the green circle on the bottom right. Because they can influence, the contract officer, they can influence a buyer, end user, to say, hey, your agency have not met your STVSB certification goals, and would you consider working with this STVSB certified business? So all that's government relationship. And then the blue circles are commercial sector relationships that you must have as well. You got to have a relationship with other small businesses, the blue far right. You got to have a relationship with them. Yes, question?
Just the SB advocates, small business advocates. How do you define those? Or who are those people?
Yeah. So every agency through federal mandate must have a small business advocates working for their agency. 23% of federal contract must be awarded to small businesses. And so every agency have them. They go by different titles. For example, most of the DOD goes by the Office of Small Business Program, or sometimes they're called the OSTBU, the Office of Small Business Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Some of them are called Small Business Specialists. In the commercial world, they're called Supply Diversity Managers. In the government world, they have different names, different titles. And so it just depends on which agency you want to focus on. They have different titles. And all agencies have a small business page that you can go to, and then you can kind of understand a little bit more from there. For the purpose of time, I can't go to a lot of details on that today, but yeah. But there's an advocate. Every agency have one. But here's a quick word of caution. You got to help them to help you. Remember that. You got to help them to help you. They're there, but they have hundreds and thousands of companies grabbing at them. And so the way you utilize small business advocates, you say, hey, I've identified these forecasts. I've identified this contracting officer. I've identified this program manager. And do you think you can email, like especially if you're in the 8A program, right? You can talk to your SBA boss, and you can give them all this information. You say, hey, I've talked to the contractor. Are they open to maybe sourcing? Can you do a requirement letter for me? So it's a lot more complex than just going to them. They're going to walk you through the halls, and it doesn't quite work that way because part of it they're busy, and some of them they do it because it's a job, and so some of them should not be in the position they're in. I'm going to call them out a little bit, right? Because they're there to support the small business. Some of them aren't really there. They're there as a job, and so find the good ones, work with them. Many of them are good. There's a few bad apples there because I advocate for small businesses, so I'm okay to step on their toes a little bit. And then the other circle, blue circle on the far left, are large primes. Large primes are required to subcontract, on average, about 35% to small businesses. So you want to engage them. Now, there is a title up there. It's small to see, the SBLO, the Small Business Liaison Officer. Every large company that wins a contract over $750,000, they must work with small businesses. They must. It's not an option unless it's a certain type of sole source or top secret, and then there's different regulations that kicks in those situations. But under normal regulations, they must sub about 35% to small businesses. So you should focus on working with these large primes. The Small Business Liaison Officer, their name in the commercial world, they're called the Supply Diversity Manager also. And so sometimes they don't know that they're called the SBLO. They just go by the Supply Diversity Manager. Sometimes they're called the Subcontracting Manager. So again, depends on which large company you're working with. They have different terminology. And then the bottom blue circle, you got to have relationships with other people that have different skill sets that you don't have. For example, if you're not a good writer, I can teach you how to write proposals all you want, but you say, Abe, I'm never going to learn how to write proposals because that's just not me. And so you need a proposal writing team. You need a accounting team so that if you need DCA compliance, the accounting team will be there to help you put in to do a pre-audit so that you can be ready to pursue contractor opportunities that requires DCA compliance. So those are different type of relationships. And then let's talk about critical infrastructure. Government have critical infrastructure needs. There's lots and lots of agencies out there. And they do it because they need innovation from the commercial sector. There are a few agencies that lead in innovation, but they realize that you can't staff enough innovation, that innovation from the commercial sector is more leading, is actually today will always lead than incubated infrastructure from the government sector, and so they need your innovation. They also, government is slow to change. There's a lot of legacy system, and some of them are still using paper. Now, there are a few agencies that's very forefront, way out there beyond any commercial companies. But most of the agencies, especially civilian agencies, they're lagging behind. So they need your product and your services. Most agencies don't make their own products. They need your products. Most agencies outsource the help. So they need your help. And again, it depends on which administration is in office. If it's a Republican administration, they tend to build up the military. If it's a Democrat administration, they tend to outsource help and build up the civilian agencies. To me, it doesn't matter. You as a business owner work in all climate, right? Whether it's a Republican administration or a Democratic administration, just work with them. And then they also need your cutting edge software technology. They don't have enough manpower to build and to stay ahead of the curve. And they need your patented technology, your patented products, and so forth. So the government is huge. 85,000 agencies out there. There's one federal. There's 430 sub-agencies at the federal. There are 50 states. There's over 3,000 counties. There's 35,000 cities and districts, and so forth and so forth. You add all that up, 85,000 agencies. Where do you start? How do you do it, right? And everybody does it a little bit different. From DOD to DOE, they do it differently. Even though they have regulations that covers majority of things, they're still very different culture. Gwinnett County does it differently from Cobb County. City of Atlanta does it differently from Clayton or Fairburn, or all these different places. Everybody does it a little bit different. So based upon who you want to do with, learn how they do their procurement. Large budget, $9 trillion last year, federal, state. Now, of that, the federal budget is $4.5 trillion. That is, if the federal government by itself, it would probably be considered one of the top 10 countries in the world, just the federal budget by itself. Check never bounce. They can print money, raise taxes, and borrow on our behalf, right? So that's good and bad because we're all about fiscal responsibility. But for you, it's all about contracting opportunities. So understand that there's risk, but hey, if there's opportunity, go after the opportunities. Specifically, in terms of contracts, they award about $500 billion on average every year. Last year, specifically, they awarded about $652 billion to businesses. That's equivalent to about 1.2 every day, 50 million every hour, 850,000 every minute, and 14,000 every second. Tick, tick. That's $28,000. Somebody's winning that money. Unfortunately, it's not you because you're sitting right here with me right now. But you're sitting here so that you can get a piece of that pie, right? So now I want to talk about grants and contracts a little bit. Most people think that grants is for nonprofit. It is. I would say 95% of grants are for nonprofit. Contract is for for-profit organizations. So if you're a for-profit business entity, that's what you want to look for. The perspective is this here. Grants, it is designed to support the community needs, whereas contract is designed to support the agency needs. So slightly different paradigms here. And then grants, on average, about $550 billion every year. Contracts, about $500 billion every year. So if you want to be, it's like an airplane. Georgia Tech, the campus that we're here, they are probably the second largest government contractor from an educational perspective. They do between $100 million to $200-300 million every single year in government contracts. Think about that.
Georgia Tech?
Georgia Tech, as a university. I'm not talking about grants. I'm talking about just contracts. So they understand that you need two wings to the airplane to fly. If you just have one wings, things get a little rocky. So for you got to have contracts and grants as part of your government endeavors so that you can have the best chance of thriving and growing. These are different resources. You feel free to look at that. So the government has lots of money. We know that. They buy in volume. They buy in best value versus lowest price. At the state and local level, they usually buy lowest price. At the federal government level, they buy best value because they understand that the critical infrastructure that must be supported, lowest price is not the best solution. They understand that. About 60% of contracts at the federal level is best value, 40% is lowest price. So mainly products are usually lowest price driven, and services is leaning more and more heavily towards best value. And there's lots of different sets. I can spend about 30 minutes talking about the difference between lowest price and best value. That's for another day. The government has less competition. There's only 600,000 vendors registered. There's about 31 million businesses in the U.S. Based upon the last SBA business census. 2% are registered to be government vendors. So it's going to be, yes, it's competitive, but it's going to be a lot less competition and lots of contract opportunity. The average government contract is $180,000. I don't know what it is for you in the commercial world, but I think you can sell T-shirt, online on eBay, or you can sell 10 million T-shirts. I met a lady. She said, "Abe, I sell cookies. I bake cookies." And I said, "Well, I don't know if I can help you sell cookies to the government. I don't know how much the government's buying cookies." And so I said, "But let's do some research." Don't want to dismiss her. I said, "Let's do some research." Well, we found a military facility here in Georgia, Fort Benning. I think it was Fort Benning. They wanted to buy 10,000 fresh baked cookies every single Sunday morning. Because they don't want it store-bought. They don't want it from anybody else. They want it to be from a small business that bakes cookies. And so, yeah, there's opportunity for everybody out there. Government, they're looking for large, small businesses because large company dominates this industry. The top 100 largest government contractor, they win 52% of all the contracting dollars out there. Think about that. Lockheed Martin, $34, $40 billion every single year. All the 8A companies, there's about 6,500 8A companies here in the U.S. They only want $25 billion. All the 8A companies cannot beat out one company. So what I did, I said, let me study Lockheed Martin so that I can help the small business community. If I can study the most successful company, take the principles that they're doing and teach it to the small business community, that's how you're going to be successful. Uncle Sam said, I want you to take my money because there's not enough small business competing. They buy everything you can imagine. There's only a few industry, IT, $38, $40 billion every year, construction, $28 billion, janitorial, cleaning services, $19 billion. I told you earlier that I'm from Laos. The GDP of Laos is about $14, $15 billion every year. We spend more on cleaning than a whole nation produces in terms of products. So think about that. Lots of money just in cleaning. Advertising, PR, $27 billion. If you're in social media, if you're on web development, anything like that, they need your services. You name it, they buy it. There's only a few small niche market. I would say if you do that, let's pivot you into a different industry. For example, you say, I sell health, individual health care. I'm gonna say, hey, you know what? Let's transition you into other things. If you say, I'm a barber, or I do hair for ladies, I'm gonna say there's not a lot of opportunities. Let's position you to other things. But 99.9% of everything else the government buys. So let's talk about some critical infrastructures that's going on right now. Roads and bridges, there's delays by itself every year causes $120 billion that's costing us. There's our deteriorating tunnels, and for example, in the Hudson River is 111 years old. The Brent Spence Bridge between Ohio and Kentucky, that is crumbling, it's creaking. So there's a lot of infrastructure that needs, whether you're in construction, doesn't matter what industry, every industry has infrastructure needs. Sewer and water systems. Jackson, Mississippi is a good example. Anytime there is a flood or a hurricane that comes through, they have water issues. We've seen dams. There's about 15,000 dams in the United States. Based upon their own survey, 2,333 dams are considered deficient, meaning that they are at risk if there's any major issue there. And we've seen different examples of what's happened over the last few years as well. So the changing climate exposes our infrastructure needs, new ones and existing ones as well. Our power grid is extremely outdated. The current infrastructure that we have in terms of power grid was implemented in the late 1800s, but the Electric Supply Act of 1926 is when we start building our infrastructure here. So there's three main infrastructure. There is the Eastern grid, which we're part of that. There's the Western grid and the Texas grid. And we saw the weaknesses of the Texas grid when, back in February, when they had a cold snap, right? And they were without electricity, they were without water, and so forth. And 4.5 million people were without, in terms of homes, were without electricity. 151 people killed during that there. So we know that there's infrastructure weaknesses all around us. The government needs your services for that there. And the ransomware attack is not an issue of when your businesses will be hacked or if, but it's when. Every agency is vulnerable, more so the local agencies than even the federal agencies. Based upon what we've seen, cybersecurity is the greatest infrastructure needs right now. And for you as a small business, the DoD says we understand that. And so we're creating the CMMC, or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. This is the most important certification for the next 5 years. Don't get your 8A. Don't get your woman-owned certification. Don't get your SDVSB. When you're dealing with a contracting officer, they're going to say, do you have your CMMC certification? That's going to be more important than your woman, 8A, veteran-owned, HUBZO, any other certification that you want to pursue. This is the certification to obtain. Why? You have an opportunity right now to displace, because right now there's about 300,000 companies that's part of the defense industrial base, 300,000 companies, and they're going to slowly ease them in. But, for example, let's assume that you've been trying to do work with Lockheed Martin for the last 5 years, and they're like, yeah, I've already have somebody doing what you're doing. I don't need another one. Well, if their current supply base is not getting CMMC certified, Lockheed is going to have to find new companies that are CMMC certified. So this is your chance to displace subcontractors. That's why you should do it now versus until you're required to do it. And then at some point, they're going to say, hey, you know what, these contracts, it's not about set aside, it's not about any other certification. In the solicitation, it's going to say, must be CMMC certified level 3, or level 2, or level 4, or level 5. And if you don't have those certifications, then it's going to hurt you. At a minimal, level 1 is very, very, not very complex to obtain. So at least do a level 1. But there's many other, level 3, level 2, just skip level 2, jump to level 3. And then there's opportunities for you to win more contract, if you get CMMC certified. Let's talk about other infrastructure. There's, for me, it's not about red or blue. Why? Because we as entrepreneurs, we think what?
Green.
Green, right? So we think green. We got to think green. And so there, right now, under the Biden administration, there's a proposal of about $1.7 trillion. Throw politics out the window as an entrepreneur. Have your own personal opinion, but focus on growing your company with the contract opportunities out there. $150 billion is slated to some of the infrastructure needs that we talked about earlier. Bridges, highways, roads, high-speed internet for the more rural communities, buildings. They want to retrofit 2 million homes and commercial buildings, especially around any federal facilities. Who's familiar with LEED? Okay, some of you. Every federal building at any renovation happening at a federal building must be LEED Silver or higher. That's some of the standards that they put in place. Schools, educational facilities, they're modernizing some of those there through some of the potential trillions of dollars that may be coming out. Even if it's $1 trillion, even if it's $565 billion, prepare your business now until it comes out. If you don't prepare now, when it hits, it's a little bit too late for you. I'm working with a company. They're in, they were in lab services. When COVID hit, they pivoted to COVID work, and they went from being a really small business to over $1 billion in government contract in 1 year. So you got to prepare ahead of time. Don't wait until you need it. And then, veteran hospital systems all getting upgrades. These are some specific opportunities out there. Challenge.gov. They use the hackathons process. And so in here, they're saying, hey, we want to envision how the future of our airspace is going to be like. They put in here all kinds of different little challenges, and some of it is 50,000, some of it is 200,000, but this is how you kind of get started. In some, if you have some innovation, some new technology, challenge.gov is a great place to kind of test out your ideas. Seed fund, they treat you as a VC firm. So the National Science Foundation, they treat your business as if it is an innovator, and they want to invest in high-risk technology. If you're like, I do, standard stuff that everybody, they don't want that. They only want high-risk industries. They put out $8.5 billion every year. That's the budget, $200 million every single year invested. It's a congressionally mandated program, and they want to fund small businesses. And now they also support educational institutions as well. But high impact, high risk type of innovations out there. And let's look at some examples. It starts off at average about $256,000, and they can go up to phase 2, $1 million. Some of the things that they invest in the back, they invest in the internet, what we use every single day. They invested in Doppler radar, web browsers, barcodes, all these different things. Some of the early stages was invested through the NSF seed funds. They don't take equity in your company. That's the beautiful thing. It's money to you to help you grow your technology. Advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, biomedical technologies, cloud computing, cybersecurity authentication, digital health, distributed ledger technologies, blockchain technologies, the Internet of Things, IoT, anything that you can imagine, nanotechnology, photonics, all these different things they want to invest in. Now, the Air Force, they have their own variation of that as well. They want to invest many small bets into a whole bunch of companies every year. So on average, about $50,000 for the first phase to about 1,500 companies every year. That's what they want to do. And then in the phase 2, they want to invest medium bets, $750,000, on average around there, to about 300 to 500 companies to move to phase 2. And then a few big bets, about 20 per year, up to $15 million. And this money you do not need to pay back. And they don't take equity in your company like a VC firm. They want your innovation, because they know there's a weakness in the infrastructure. So let's talk about a few things before we wrap up here. A few quick secrets in terms of how to get started in the government market. Start with micro purchases. Any project under $10,000 does not need to go through a procurement process. They can just swipe their credit card and you're done. Purchase order or SAP, simplified acquisition procedures, $250,000 or less. The regulation says they must use a small business first. So to the micro purchases, they can swipe a credit card. There's no competition required, and it's at the discretion of the contracting officer.
So you got to get a relationship with the contract officer, man.
You just got to get to know them and see what their pain points are and say, hey, you know what, I can do that. And then if they know you, like you, trust you, the micro purchases happens every single day. Another great website to do, this is like eBay, fedbid.com. Anybody use Fedbid before? Okay. So it's called Unison Global now, but fedbid.com, if you go to fedbid.com, it still takes you to the same place. You must be registered in SAM to use Fedbid, but it's like reverse eBay. So on there, at any given time, there's about 200 projects on there, almost every industry you can think of. And most of it is $250,000 or less. It's rare that you're going to see anything over $250,000, and they buy product and services on there. And you go on there, it's very easy. Click submit your bid. That's it. And if you're the lowest, the system will say you won. If you're not the lowest, the system will say you're not the lowest, and you can revise your price. Very, very easy to get started using this platform here. Be a subcontractor. We talked about that there. Number 3, go after sole source contract. Leverage your the sole source opportunities out there, especially your certifications. It's a direct award to one company. There's no competition, and your profit margin is going to be a lot higher through price negotiation. And then obtaining sole source, mainly sole source is done through 8A. I don't care what the SBA says. I don't care what any other agency says. They're going to say all certifications are equal. It's not true. In the real world, 8A is the strongest certification. So if you're not 8A certified, team up with the 8A company. Now, they are starting to do more sole source to women-owned, veteran-owned. All the companies I work with, I've only heard of 2 women-owned businesses that receive a sole source. There may be more, but the bulk of sole source is done through 8A companies. Yes?
What do you think about, so I've heard a lot, and I've been told a lot, that I should wait until my company's ready for 8A in terms of going after competition or going after contracts to get started with applying for 8A. So should I just go ahead and apply for 8A before I can get certified, or should I wait until my company is certain?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
It depends. Usually, it takes about 3 years to kind of figure out the government market. It's like learning a new language. So it takes about 3 years to kind of get acclimated. And so if you start too soon, while you're learning, you're losing years on your 8A. So that's why they say that. My suggestion is get started about year 1, year 2, somewhere about year 2 in it, then start, because it takes about 6 months to 9 months to get your 8A approval. So don't start immediately because you don't want to waste 1 or 2 years. But yeah, as soon as you think you're ready, go for it. There's sole source opportunities at the federal level, state level, county level, city level. And what you need to do is just, you just Google the name of the agency, City of Atlanta sole source, and they will pull up the clause of what the threshold is. I believe the City of Atlanta sole source is like 100,000, which is only the chief procurement contract officer can sole source. At the federal level, a contracting officer can sole source up to $4 million to an 8A company, so it just depends on where you're working at. Unsolicited proposal. This here is a rarely used program, and it's very simple. It's about 4 pages. It's a direct award to one company. There's no competition, and you have potential for higher profit using unsolicited proposal. Now, it's not meant for you to use it to market your product or services, but how does that work here? First, you identify a problem the agency has, either through a relationship with an end user, or you just know that if this exists in the commercial world, it exists. The same problem that the commercial will have, same problem the agency will have as well. So you identify a problem, and then you match the problem with your unique solution. Even though your solution is not developed yet, you can still do an unsolicited proposal. And then you go through you send out a preliminary project proposal to them, and you write out an unsolicited proposal, submit it, and then you discuss, and they say, you know what, we need you, and then they're going to negotiate price with you and then award you a contract to deliver the product or the service, and then you get paid. Now, in an unsolicited proposal is this here. In a solicited or a solicitation RFP or IFB or something like that, the government knows they have a problem, and they're asking for you to give them a solution. In an unsolicited, they may have a problem, but they don't know they have a problem. And so you're supposed to go educate them that they have a problem, and then you give them the solution, and that's how they're going to engage you in that process there. So in a BAA, broad agency announcements. In the broad agency announcements, 435, it's a little different from unsolicited. Broad agency announcement means the government says, we know we have a problem, we don't know what the solutions are. So it's not like a solicitation, because in the solicitation, they actually craft the requirement exactly what they want in the statement of work or the PWS, performance work statement. In a BAA, they say, we have a problem. We don't know what the solution is. And so they put out a broad agency announcement to all, the industrial base, all these businesses in the community. They say, hey, give us a white paper of what you think the solution is going to be. And then you give them a white paper, And if they usually choose not just one, but 2 or 3 companies because they don't know which one's going to be the right fit. And they choose a few, and then they award that money. Sometimes they just choose one depending on which agency and how they do it. But in this situation, you prepare a white paper, and they work with you in that situation. And usually it leads to a sole source contract. SBIR, STR, we talked about that a little bit earlier. And let me just show you some of the resources. There's 11 agencies that uses SBIR, STR grants out there, 2.5 billion every single year. DOD puts out the most opportunities as it relates to SBIR, STR. 20% of them are awarded to minority-owned businesses. The 25 are receiving grants as for the first time. These are some of the resources: SBIR.gov, cfund.nsf.gov, and the DOD is this second site here. So utilize this resource. The PowerPoint will be available through me and through FCA, so feel free to do that there. And lastly, let's talk about OTAs, other transaction authorities. Now, I love OTAs, working with a few companies to kind of put some of these things together. I've never gone through a full life cycle of an OTA where it awards yet, but I love it because if you have innovation that is closer to market ready, but you still need research, you still need some development to get it there, using OTA is a great way to do this here. The best thing I love about this here is it's considered a direct purchase with your company, and it does not go under the FAR. Does not use the FAR. Very, very important principle. And so in this here, they can award you a $50 million project, sole source, within 90 days of working with you, identifying the pain point, talking about your solution. Now, usually it's similar to SBIR. Usually you have to do a pilot. You have to go through stages until they say, okay, we believe that your solution is going to solve the pain point that, whether they have it and they know. So it's kind of like a hybrid between SBIR, unsolicited, but the threshold is higher and it's treated as a commercial purchase, and it does not use the FAR. So very, very important. So next steps for you. Start building your capture team. Focus on past performance. Sometimes when you're new, don't focus on profit. Focus on past performance. Most project requires that you have 3 past performance or more. Join a tribe. You got to learn how to halu Governese, right? You got to learn the language. Join tribe. If you want to be a football player, you hang out at the gym. If you want to be a drunk, you hang out at the bar. If you want to be a government contractor, join a tribe that speak Governese, right? So you got to do that. And FCA is a great place to do that there. And then get help. Everybody needs help at some point. GCA, we're a great resource for that. We have an accelerated program, a coaching program. We have a capture management program where we certify you to be a certified capture manager. We have events, classes. Some of our classes are free. Some of them, there's a small cost to attend it. These are a few people that we work with. Recently, this is Sheena. She, janitor company, she came and said, hey, I need some help. Put her into our capture management program. As a CEO, she didn't have time, so she brought in one of her salesperson. We trained her to become a capture manager. Before the program was finished in about 4 months, they won 5 contracts. In fact, they had to turn down the 5th one because they didn't have the financial resources or the manpower to do it. So very proud of what they've done. And then this is Barbara. She was very successful at the local level and the commercial world, but she wanted to expand into the government market. She got her 8A certification. She said, Abe, how do I do this federal work? And so we started working with her. The CDC invited her to go do a capability briefing with them. She said, hey, I'm a little nervous. I don't think I want to go to this, And they're asking for something that I don't really do. We do waste. We do janitorial work. We don't do waste remediation. And so CDC was looking for someone to come and recycle their paper and recycle the computers, and she doesn't do that stuff. And I said, if you get invited to a capability brief, always say yes, because you may never have another chance like that again. So we prepped her a little bit, created a capability brief, cleaned it up, found a teaming partner with her that does waste remediation. And so she went and presented to the to the CDC. A month and a half later, she was awarded a $3.7 million sole source contract. So with that said, I'm going to leave you guys out this year. I'm going to leave my business cards up here if you need some help. We're here to support the small business community. And Missy, thank you. AFCIA, thank you. All of you that belongs to AFCIA, it's been a pleasure and a joy. If you need help, again, we're a resource to support you in the government space.
Thanks, sir.